So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a short span of time within 30 minutes so that you get to cover your current affairs on a daily basis, but you do not have to spend your entire day just reading the newspaper or covering that day's current affairs. You have your rest of the day for covering other parts of your UPSC syllabus. Now, just after watching this lecture series, you need to revise this lecture as well, because revision helps in consolidating these current affairs in your memory. Otherwise, you'll quickly forget them. Now, you can revise these current affairs from the notes provided by us, and these notes shall be shared on our Telegram channel. Now, where can you find our Telegram channel? Well, just below this video in the comment section, you will find a link. Just click on that link, it will take you to our Telegram channel, and from there you can download this lecture's notes. Okay, so let's begin today's session. But first, let's take a look at the topics that we are going to cover in today's lecture. Let's take a look at the list of topics. So today's topics. Number one, Trump's tariff threat. Okay, before getting elected, President Donald Trump, during his election rallies, used to say that he is going to impose tariffs on different countries so that American jobs can be brought back from these different countries. Okay, and American manufacturing sector gets a boost. So, what are tariffs? How would these tariffs help America, and how would these tariffs be counterproductive? Are these tariffs threatening for other countries? We'll talk about this issue. Then, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao has completed 10 years. So we will have a look at this landmark scheme for gender empowerment by Indian government. Okay. Then DRDO, Defense Research and Development Organization, has tested Scramjet technology. And this Scramjet technology is an essential component of hypersonic missiles. So if India wants to develop hypersonic missiles, it needs to perfect this technology of Scramjet. Okay, currently USA, China, and Russia, all three of them are involved in a race of getting access to these hypersonic missiles. No country has developed hypersonic missiles. Yes, there are some news that China has developed hypersonic missiles, but all these three countries, these great powers, are after hypersonic missiles because they say hypersonic missiles would be a great advantage in a war like situation. So India also wants to get its hands on hypersonic missiles. So that is why DRDO is developing Scramjet technology. So we'll talk about this. And in the end, we'll talk about Article 25 of the Constitution, which grants all citizens fundamental right to religion, freedom of religion. And what is this doctrine of essential practice vis-a-vis Article 25 that was given by the Honorable Supreme Court? So we'll talk about this issue. Okay. All right. So let's begin today's session, starting with topic number one, which is Trump's tariff threat. So during his election campaign, Donald Trump had promised to impose tariffs on countries to bring back manufacturing jobs to USA. Now look, what is the situation? You need to have a little bit of a background to understand why Donald Trump is threatening different countries with tariffs. Okay. Now look, I'll give you an example. USA and China trade goods and services, right? They both have imports and exports. Clear? Now USA runs trade deficit with China. Okay, now what do we mean by trade deficit? By trade deficit, we mean that USA imports more goods from China than it exports to China. So USA is buying more from China than it is exporting to China, right? That is why there is a trade deficit for USA, whereas there is a trade surplus for China. Now, Donald Trump doesn't like it. Donald Trump wants to sell more to China than to buy from China because, after all, if you run a trade surplus, you earn more money, like China is. Okay? And Donald Trump says that China is taking advantage of US by running high trade deficits. Okay? Plus, many Americans are buying Chinese goods because America is importing a lot from China. Now, China sells these goods at very cheap prices. Okay? Case in point is cars, automobiles. China is selling electric cars at very low prices, so low that most of the consumers of USA are opting for Chinese electric vehicles because they are affordable. Whereas the American electric cars are not being bought by American citizens because they are expensive. Okay, so American companies are losing market share. They are running losses, they are closing down their factories, and because they are closing down their factories, a lot of jobs, especially manufacturing jobs, are being lost in USA. Okay, and China is gaining a lot because China is able to sell so many cars to USA, earning a lot of money and generating a lot of jobs in China. Okay, so it's a very good situation for China. But Donald Trump does not like this. So, what has Donald Trump proposed? Donald Trump says that the reason why Chinese companies are able to eliminate their competition with American companies is because China is able to sell cars at very low prices. So, Donald Trump says that if we import cars from China, well, those cars would face a tax. That tax is known as import duty. Okay. Now, that import duty could be as high as 50%, which means that if China is selling a car for $100,000, when it reaches America, America will demand a tax of 50%. That means that car would cost $150,000 in America because China is levying a kind of import duty or GST on those cars. So, by levying such high tax or import duty, America is making Chinese cars expensive so that American companies can compete with China. Okay, because China is selling these cars at very cheap prices, so America is levying high taxes on Chinese cars so as to artificially increase their prices, like it levies GST. Okay, now this import duty also goes by the name of tariffs. Okay. Now, Donald Trump has said that he is going to impose tariffs on different countries. China is number one on the list, but Donald Trump has even said to impose tariffs on Canada because with Canada also, USA runs a trade deficit. Donald Trump says that he might impose a tariff on Mexico as well and many other countries with which Donald Trump feels that they are taking advantage of US and are running high trade deficits. Okay, so this is the tariff threat of Donald Trump, that we are going to levy high taxes on your products because you are taking advantage of us. Now, why do these countries fear these tariffs? Well, the reason is these tariffs would make goods from these countries expensive. Then people, American people, won't opt for Chinese or Canadian or Mexican goods, and they would opt for American goods. This would lead to losses for Chinese, Canadian, and Mexican companies. And this is bad for China, Canada, and Mexico. Right? Make sense? So, the fundamental purpose of levying tariffs is, first of all, protect US domestic manufacturing industry from competition with cheap imported products, especially from China. So, you will protect American companies who are not being able to sell their products to Americans because they are expensive, but China is undercutting them. So, this will help US domestic manufacturing companies. Now, if US domestic manufacturing companies basically they grow, then they would open more factories. They would open more factories, then this would increase manufacturing jobs in USA, which is a benefit for America, right? Plus, by levying these taxes, USA also aims to earn some revenue also. So Donald Trump says that okay, my first purpose is that Americans shouldn't buy Chinese goods. So I'm levying these taxes. But even if Americans are, or even still, if Americans still choose to buy Chinese goods, then they have to pay a tax. And through that tax, we'll earn a lot of revenue. So America is going to benefit out of it. Okay. Plus, Donald Trump hopes that for the fear of these tariffs, the Chinese companies would get so scared of these tariffs that Chinese companies would open factories in America. Okay. Now, if Chinese companies open factories in America, then they are producing those goods in America itself. So they no longer need to pay import duty or tariffs because they are manufacturing things in America on American soil. Okay. Now, through this, Donald Trump thinks that's a win-win situation. These companies would also gain. Plus, if they are shifting their factories to USA, that would generate a lot of jobs, manufacturing jobs in America. So again, Donald Trump says tariffs bring a where bring a, basically tariffs bring good news for America. Okay. Now, what options do these countries have on whom these tariffs would be levied? First is a strategy which is generally employed by China, that is dumping. So let's suppose China is selling a car at $100,000. Okay. And after 50% tariff, this car would cost $150,000 in America. Now, people won't opt for Chinese cars and Chinese companies would run losses. So, what do these Chinese companies do? They make their cars, or they reduce the selling price of their cars. Okay, they reduce their selling price from $100,000 to $50,000 or $60,000 basically, or $65,000. They reduce their price to such an extent that even after levying 50% duty, their cars would still cost $100,000 in America. Okay. Now, this is known as dumping. They would artificially reduce the prices of their cars so much that even after this 50% tariff, they would still outcompete American car companies. Okay. So, in a sense, they would absorb these tariffs. Now, by doing so, they will achieve a significant market share in America. They would run losses. Definitely, they would run losses. But they would outcompete all American companies. They would achieve a monopoly like market share. And when they have achieved monopoly, then they can raise prices and recover their losses. And China is basically competent enough to do so. Other countries aren't. Okay. The other step that these Chinese companies can take, or other countries can take, is pass on the tariff cost to the consumers. That is, if your cars cost $100,000 with 50% duty, now it would sell at $150,000. So this is something that would really harm these companies because American consumers would shift. Okay, or they could set up a factory inside USA. USA wants that. Or what China is expert at doing. Okay, what China would do is China would first ship its products to Mexico. Now, Mexico has a free trade agreement with USA. USA does not levy any tariff on Mexico. Okay, so what would China do? China first will ship its products to Mexico, and from Mexico, then it will bring its products into USA. Now, because the products are coming from Mexico, USA won't levy any tax. This is called trade rerouting or trade rerouting. Or China can impose retaliatory tariff. China will impose tariffs on American products that China is importing. This would lead to a trade war like situation. Okay, so these are the steps that Chinese companies can take, or China can take. Okay, now if there is a full-fledged trade war between USA and China, well, India can benefit because now instead of China, India would be able to sell its goods to USA. Okay, because USA won't accept goods from China, so India has the opportunity of filling this void. So India can take advantage of this trade war, but we'll wait and watch. Let's see. All right. Okay, let's move forward to 10 years of Beti Bachao Beti Padhao. So Beti Bachao Beti Padhao program was to basically improve child sex ratio, okay, save girl child, okay, and empower this girl child by getting her enrolled into educational institutions. This is Beti Bachao Beti Padhao. So basically Beti Bachao means save the girl child and then empower the girl child through education. Now, this scheme was launched exactly a decade ago on January 22nd, 2015 by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Panipat, which is in Haryana. Okay. The main purpose was to arrest the decline in child sex ratio. Now, initially, this scheme was planned for 100 districts. Then it was expanded to 61 additional districts, and then later to all 640 districts of the country. So, this scheme became a pan India scheme. Initially, it was only targeted to the 100 most vulnerable districts where child sex ratio is very low. Then it was expanded to pan India. Okay. Now, what were the objectives of this scheme? Well, to prevent gender-based sex selection, gender-biased sex selection. Before the birth of the child, parents used to determine the sex through ultrasound. Okay, and then if they found that they are giving birth to a girl child, they would abort the child. This is gender-biased sex selection, ensuring the survival, education, and empowerment of girl child. This scheme actually set many targets, like there were targets for nutritional status of girls, that girls shouldn't be malnourished. There were targets to ensure their attendance in schools. There were targets to ensure provision of adequate infrastructure in schools. Many a times, females used to drop out of schools because there were no female washrooms in those schools. Okay, and that was a big issue. So there was government wanted to ensure that there is enough infrastructure for girls to study in schools. That is why girls enrollment ratio or female enrollment ratio in these schools would rise. Okay, so there were targets for all these things. Now, what were the tools employed to improve these targets? First, publicity campaigns, inspections and raids to stop illegal detection of pregnancy, and various other measures. Now, what were the results of this scheme? Okay, so it has been 10 years. What has this scheme achieved? Well, sex ratio at birth has improved, but it has improved only in some states and worsened in others. So, as far as this target is concerned, mixed results are for us to see. Then, gender gap in under 5 mortality minimized. What is under 5 mortality rate? Under 5 mortality rate actually checks how many kids died who were under the age of 5 per thousand children or per thousand live births. Okay. Now, there was a lot of gender gap in this. More female childs died as compared to male childs under the age of 5. Now, this gap has minimized. Then, increase in institutional births. Government had set a target of increasing institutional deliveries by at least 1.5% every year. Earlier, even today, in many rural areas, females do not opt for going to the hospital to deliver their baby. They call their local midwives and others. Okay. Now, government doesn't want that because these local midwives don't take care of sanitation and other things, which leads to child mortality. So, government had set itself a target of increasing institutional deliveries. That means females should go to hospital to deliver. Okay. Increase in antenatal checkups. Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao envisioned a minimum 1% increase per year in the first trimester antenatal checkup. First 3 months of checkups with doctor. This was also a target. And the result, which really basically was or sounded like good news for many policymakers, was increase in enrollment of girls in secondary education. This was something that really heartened the hearts and minds of policymakers. We saw a lot of improvement. I mean, this scheme was successful when it comes to this metric. Okay, there has been a steady increase in female enrollment in secondary education. Okay, so this is Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. Now let's move on to a very significant scientific breakthrough. DRDO tests Scramjet technology. So DRDO, Defense Research and Development Organization, recently demonstrated the Scramjet combustor ground test for 120 seconds for the first time in India. Ministry of Defense has called it a crucial milestone in developing next generation hypersonic missiles. Okay, now first we'll come to what is scramjet technology later, but first you need to know what hypersonic missiles are. Okay, well, there are three types of missiles as far as if we classify them on the basis of their speed: hypersonic, supersonic, and subsonic. Okay, if the speed of your missile is less than the speed of sound, it is called subsonic missile. If the speed of your missile is more than the speed of sound, it is called supersonic. Now, speed of these missiles is measured in Mach numbers. Okay, if the speed of this missile is Mach 1, that means the speed of this missile is equal to the speed of sound. If the speed of this missile is Mach 2, then twice the speed of sound. If it is Mach 3, then three times the speed of sound, and so on and so forth. So, supersonic missiles are those missiles which travel at a speed between Mach 1 and Mach 5. So if a missile is traveling at a speed which is greater than the speed of sound, that is Mach 1, and less than Mach 5, 5 times the speed of sound, it is called supersonic. And hypersonic missiles are those missiles whose speed is even more than 5 times the speed of sound, Mach 5. Okay. Now, many countries are after hypersonic weapons because hypersonic weapons would give a really good strategic advantage in a warlike situation. No country has uh, developed hypersonic missiles, though there are reports, but there is no official proof that any country has. But USA, Russia, and China are at advanced stages. Now, India also wants to possess hypersonic weapons for their strategic advantage in warlike situations, right? So, for India to have these hypersonic weapons, and if India wants to produce these hypersonic weapons indigenously, then India needs to master this technology of scramjet. Okay? Now, what is scramjet? You see, a few years back, there was this technology called ramjet. Okay? Now, what is ramjet technology? The thing is that most of the rockets carry fuel. Okay? Now, fuel is important to power these rockets. But this fuel needs to burn. Okay? Now, to burn this fuel, you need an oxidizer. this oxidizer would help in burning this fuel. So what happened was, in normal rockets, this fuel was compressed and then an oxidizer was added. This compressed fuel with the oxidizer used to burn and provide the energy. But the problem is that this oxidizer carries a lot of weight. Okay. So now scientists actually perfected a technology called ramjet technology. Instead of carrying this oxidizer, you will use oxygen from the air to burn the fuel. So this is a scramjet rocket. Okay. It is moving in this direction and air is coming from this direction. Now, this rocket is moving at such high speeds that air is coming into the nozzle of this rocket at very high speeds. Because this air is coming at very high speeds and there is a very narrow opening, this air gets compressed. And in these narrow pipes, you will find fuel, which is already compressed. So, this compressed air, compressed hot air comes inside, gets in touch with the fuel, and ignites the fuel. Why? Because this air contains oxygen. Okay, so you don't need to carry any oxidizer. This engine or this rocket will use atmospheric oxygen to burn the fuel and power itself. Okay, that is why ramjet engines were called air breathing jet engines. They used to breathe oxygen from outside and burn the fuel inside them, much like human body. We breathe oxygen, we breathe air, we get oxygen, and oxygen is used to burn our food that we have eaten, and we produce energy, right? So ramjets are air breathing jet engines that use the vehicle's forward motion to compress inflowing air for combustion. Okay. Now the problem with ramjet engines was that they used to work perfectly fine when the rocket was traveling at supersonic speeds. Okay, which is Mach 1 to Mach 5. Generally, they used to work perfectly fine till Mach 3. But they stopped working when the rockets achieved a speed higher than Mach 5, which is hypersonic. So ramjet engines work at supersonic speeds, but they fail at hypersonic speeds. Therefore, an upgrade was done to these ramjet engines. Okay, and this upgrade is called supersonic combustion ramjet or scramjet. So, scramjet engines are an advanced version of ramjet engines that operate at hypersonic speeds. Now, very few countries have this technology, and India is one of them. In fact, India has been after this technology, scramjet technology, for over 2 decades now. Okay, and both ISRO, because ISRO also makes rockets for launching satellites, and DRDO, because DRDO makes rockets for missiles. So rockets have dual purpose. They are used in space related missions. They are used in defense related missions. Okay, both these agencies have been after this technology, and now both these agencies have access to this technology. Okay. DRDO, ISRO, and their partners have been working on hypersonic systems for over 2 decades. The first experimental mission of ISRO's Scramjet engine was successfully conducted from Sriharikota in 2016. Now, ISRO plans to use Scramjet technology for its future rockets because currently the rockets that ISRO is using, PSLV, GSLV, in those rockets, along with the fuel, it has to carry the oxidizer as well. An oxidizer has a lot of weight, therefore this makes these rockets heavy and you have to burn more fuel to lift these rockets. Now, if there is no need for carrying this oxidizer, then this would really give a huge boost to ISRO's new rockets. So that is why ISRO is after them. DRDO is after them because hypersonic engine would get perfected through scramjet technology. Okay, so this technology, scramjet technology, has dual purpose. ISRO wants it for space missions, DRDO wants it for defense applications. Okay, and last but definitely not the least, essential practice and Article 25. Okay, first let's see what was in the news. So, observing that the use of a loudspeaker is not an essential part of any religion, the Bombay High Court had directed state government to have an inbuilt mechanism to control decibel levels in loudspeakers. The High Court directed Mumbai police to take strict action against violators. Now, what is the situation? Look, Article 25 of the Constitution gives every citizen this fundamental right to freely practice, profess, and propagate their religion. Article 25 is also known as the Freedom of Religion article. This fundamental right actually gives us freedom to practice our own religion. Okay? Now, the thing is that the Supreme Court has earlier said that only essential practices of a particular religion would be covered under freedom of religion. You can't actually choose any practice and call it a religious practice and freely practice it. Okay? Supreme Court says only essential practices of a particular religion would receive the protection of Article 25. Now, using that judgment by the Honorable Supreme Court in 1950s, Bombay High Court has said that loudspeakers used by various religious organizations, well, use of loudspeakers is not an essential practice of that religion. Therefore, it won't be protected under Article 25. Because when the government authorities used to prevent these religious organizations from using loudspeakers, then these religious organizations used to say that we have the protection of Article 25, we are practicing our religion, and this is our fundamental right. So Bombay High Court has said that using loudspeakers is not an essential practice of your religion. Therefore, it won't receive the protection of Article 25. Article 25 gives you freedom of religion, but only the essential practices of religion. You can't call any practice as your religious practice and just freely practice it. No. Only essential practices of a religion will be covered or will be protected under Article 25. So what is Article 25? So Article 25 of the Constitution, it guarantees the freedom of conscience and the right to practice, profess and propagate your religion. Okay, but the Constitution mentions some exceptions. Okay, it says that your religious practices can be curtailed if public order is threatened, if morality is problem, like certain religious practices or certain practices were like sati, female infanticide, child marriage. These practices were continued on the basis of them being religious practices. Many people used to defend these social evils or bad practices by saying that these are our religious practices and we have the right to protect our religion under Article 25. So, our constitution clearly mentioned that your religious practices are subject to public order, morality, and health. So, you can't claim immunity from the government if your religious practice is violating morality. Okay, so for example, many people or many religious leaders used to prevent entry of lower caste people into the temples and based it on uh, some scriptures. Okay, they said it is our religious practice and we are allowed to practice our religion. So government here says no, because this religious practice is against morality, health. And the courts have the right to determine which religious practice is violating public order, morality, or health. Plus, Article 25 says that you have the right to propagate your religion. But this propagation does not include forced conversions. Okay? You can promote your religion, you can convert people into your religion, but you cannot go for forced conversions. Okay? Now, Supreme Court in 1954 also added one more thing. Supreme Court said that not all religious practices would be protected under Article 25. Supreme Court in the famous Shirur Mutt case of 1954, okay, said that only the essential practices, those practices which are considered essential in a religion, would be protected under Article 25. Okay, so through this case, Supreme Court gave the doctrine of essential religious practices. Okay, so if the court wants to ban a particular practice, okay, and the people supporting that practice say that it is a religious practice and we have that right under Article 25, Supreme Court can say that this is not your essential practice and that is why we won't protect it. The Supreme Court used this doctrine of essential religious practice to ban triple talaq. Okay, because when the government came out with a law to ban triple talaq, many Muslim leaders went to the Supreme Court under Article 25 that this action by the government is violating our fundamental right to religion. So the Supreme Court said that triple talaq is not an essential practice of Islam. It is banned in many Islamic countries. It is not practiced in many Islamic countries. Therefore, it is not an essential practice of Islam, and therefore, it does not receive the protection under Article 25. Okay, so I hope you understood this point, this part related to polity. Okay, this news item was related to polity. Any which way, with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I'm sure it has added value to your preparation. but it would add more value if you revise this lecture as well. So please do not forget to revise. It would really help in consolidating these current affairs in your memory for longer periods of time. And on that note, I'll be signing off. Thank you so much, everyone.